Good afternoon or evening, wherever you are. This is the concluding part of World War II TV's build-up to D-Day week, and we are going to the skies, and we are talking about the radar the Germans had set up along the French, Belgian, Dutch coasts, and the RAF and other people's involvement in getting rid of it to make the Operation Overlord or Neptune, depending if you've been keeping up on Twitter, whether or not we are all using the word Overlord when we should be using the word Neptune. If you haven't seen that conversation, that was running this week, Stephen Fisher on Twitter. But anyway, we're talking about radar. So my guest, we were just saying he hasn't actually done a solo show. It's his first solo flight today. He's done a few sort of tandem jumps and some kind of with other crew. But it's his first solo show. But he was there on the first one, well, near the first one, June the 6th last year, Matt Bone, talking about this sort of subject, but just for a few minutes. But tonight, Matt Bone is joining us, so you now know Matt, not just from me, but from History Hack, doing his aviation stuff there with wonderful people like Mike Bechtold and others talking about Tiffies and Spitfires and all that kind of stuff and hedge hopping and all that. So good evening, Matt. How are you doing?
Very well, Woody. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm tickety-boo, thank you, Doctor. I've been out at the D-Day sites doing some filming this morning, so it's always good to get out there in the sunshine and see some sights. So, just if you've been watching what we've been doing this week, we've covered aerial photography, we've covered intelligence, we've covered yesterday, Nick Stanley gave us an incredible rundown on how the mine-sweeping operation took place. But now we're talking, as I said there in the top of the show, they're about radar. So you are something of a kind of second Tactical Air Force and Typhoons and Spitfires and kind of Air Forcey kind of guy. So let's start the presentation. You've kindly sent a massive amount of PowerPoint slides, and we'll work through them. And then when I have questions, or when someone has a question on the sidebar, we will jump in. So tell us all about it, Mr. Bone.
Yeah, so today we're just going to basically be talking about blowing stuff up. You know, Tom Whittington did that fantastic show back in February about 100 Group, about how, you know, the electronic countermeasures and things could be done. And we will mention sort of Glimmer and Taxable a bit later. But really, let's just break some stuff tonight and see how it goes, because in that lead up to D-Day, we sort of think of that night of 5th, 6th June as being, you know, it is this incredible moment, but it didn't just happen. There was months of planning, but also in this case, there was about a month of a very bloody battle that's mostly forgotten about, which is basically punching a hole through the invisible Atlantic wall. And the interesting thing is, it was a very select group of men and aircraft that went after it. And we can sort of say, you know, why. And we're going to look at the what and hopefully a little bit of the how and some of the issues that come in as well.
Yeah, that's David O'Keefe's comment there. Yeah, I'll try not to say the words burrow. I'm not even going to say the two words. I will use burrow for the time being, so I don't trip David O'Keefe's drinking game.
Well, I just looked here. We got Mike and John and Dave here, so that if I screw this up, they will very quickly put me right, which is great. So let's crack on. If you want to go to the first part. So where are we in May 1944? So Second Tactical is about a year old. And if you know, it's sort of an amalgamation of two group, bit of Army cooperation, and Fighter Command has kind of been dissolved. It's now become Air Defense Great Britain. And this is a new striking arm sort of built out of what was sort of proven in the desert, and basically put into action by Raymond Collishaw back in 1940 with the Battle of Bardia. Mary Conyngham, Tedder built on it, and we now have Second Tactical, and then on the US Army Air Force side, we've got the 9th as well. But for our sort of story today, we're going to mostly be chatting about 2 TAF. And the fun thing is you've got a bunch of, you know, bomber crews there as well. You've got Mosquitoes, you've got Mitchells, a lot of medium and lights. When 2 TAF was formed, apparently all the bomber crews immediately undid their top button because they considered themselves fighter pilots and fighter crews now. Yeah. But they've been a bit preoccupied because since sort of late 1943, there's been these strange fortifications going up all over France. And in the great sort of, if we don't know what it is, let's blow it up mentality, they've been attacking what they've been calling no-ball sites. And of course, these are the V2 sites that'll come into operation very shortly after D-Day. So Second Tactical is racing through this, but at the same time, there's a massive reorganization going on because the Allied air commanders know that what they have set up in the UK won't work for the invasion and the supporting of it. So you've got wings being reformed. You've got the Typhoon squadrons being shifted out of air defense. They're quickly training on dropping bombs and firing rockets. So by May, all but 2 of the Typhoon squadrons have moved over to the ground attack role. 2 have been left to support the Tempests for air defense GP. But we now get this moment where the plan is a go, and we have to punch a hole. So we go to the next one. We've got one of the wing commanders is New Zealander Desmond Scott, author of 2 fantastic books, Typhoon Pilot and One More Hour. And he describes this time as just a blur, basically. And as he says in Typhoon Pilot, he said the orders were clear and concise: destroy all enemy radar stations between Ostend and the Channel Islands. It was a simple command. But the radar stations were without doubt the most formidable targets, and getting at them was like fighting your way into a hornet's nest. Now, you've got 2 issues here. You've got very well defended targets all along the coast, and they're very well defended targets that can see you coming. So, this isn't sort of, popping up over the hedge and shooting something up and disappearing again. They've been watching you since you took off. So if you go to the next slide, we can kind of see what that coverage is. This isn't a great slide, but it sort of shows there's 2 red lines, really. The dashed one there that Woody's highlighting is what we call the Wasserman range. So that's the sort of the chain home of old Battle of Britain days. And then below it, a little bit closer in, you've got the Freya, which is sort of chain low. So they can see everything that's happening into the UK. So if you're thinking about what's going to happen for the invasion, especially with the formations of the airborne forming up in the Midlands and south of that, they can see that coming. So the important thing is, let's bring that visibility down and buy us some time, because they know they're not going to be able to completely wipe it out, but they just need to buy some time. So if we look at the next slide, we can start to see what we've got here. So this is a Freya station. Now, the Freya was more or less one of the better radars, because it could be manipulated in lots of different ways. And funnily enough, just as I say that, my cheat sheet next to me has turned the screen off and I can't get into it.
Oh no!
Yes.
Do you want me to sing a song while you're finding it again?
There we go. That's all right. Things have to go wrong for them to go right. So there we go. Yeah. So basically, what we're looking at here with Freya is it's a big sort of reinforced chicken wire mesh. Essentially, it's got about 125 miles range. And it's used for lots of different things. There's sea versions for watching. They call it coast watchers. But what they can also do with them, if we go to the next slide, is stack them up. So what a Freya can do, it's got a very limited range as it's going through, and it's not very good at telling height, but it's very good at picking up aircraft and ships. But when you start stacking them up, these are called, well, the Allies would call them chimneys, but this immediately gives you height as well as range. So you can start seeing long distances and also the height at which these aircraft are coming in. So this is the one at Bergen-on-Sea, taken from the nose of a mosquito in 1944. Interestingly, before this begins, the sites in Holland were the ones that they went to test to see whether or not they could shoot them down. So Reginald Jones, the great radar buff, and sent Johnny Baldwin and 198 off to see if they could knock one of these chimneys over. And they did. So they went, all right, well, let's do it to the rest of them. Because it's not just those 2 types. If we go to the next one, you've got the Mammut, which is, they call it the hoarding. Again, basically, you're looking at about 9 Freyas there together. So it's an incredibly versatile radar system that is giving them loads of information all the way through. But it's not just that. So that's giving you sort of tracking and surveillance equipment. But what happens when someone's coming at you quickly? And the next radar type is the one that's most famous. So that is Bruneval. That's the site of Operation Bicing. Oh, don't do that. So, Typhoon. Cheers, everybody.
Oh dear.
There we go.
So this something now, haven't I? Yeah.
It's downhill from here. So of course this is Bruneval, and this is the Würzburg that Operation Biting and John Frost went after in 1941. So this is the classic 1941 PRU photo of it. So the Würzburg is basically your tracking and gun laying radar. So this is going to pick you up, and it's going to keep you painted and be able to give controllers a lot of information for it. So the Allies knew a lot about this after Biting. But what happens next is the Germans then spring the next version of Würzburg on us, which is the Giants. This is the one that was on the top of Pont du Hoc. A bit of worse wear. This is sort of a week after D-Day. But these ones are quite special. They're at the museum just by you as well, which I think is one of two that's left. But these things can go about 50 miles. They've got a 24-foot dish, and they are vital, especially when things are coming at you. Because if we click to the next one, this is what's about to happen. You're about to attack quite a small front with a lot of people, and you've got the airborne coming in over the Channel Islands. You've got the ships coming across the channel. And if you click to the next side, this is sort of flipped around now. So north is down and south is up. This is the defenses from a radar perspective. So where you've got Desselfink and Eigel, that's the beaches. We've got Ammer, and I'm not even going to say the other one. That's the Caudecotein Peninsula, where the airborne's going to drop, or the airborne's going to come over and drop. So you can see, even though they think everything's going to be happening over by Bulldodge, which is not Calais and Boulogne. They've basically made sure that the invisible Atlantic wall covers the whole thing. So whereas the actual one was a bit hit and miss, the radar coverage is superb. So these are all the stations that are there at D-20. And what you have on each of these different little icons is showing that they're doing lots of different things at each place. So you don't just have a Luftwaffe radar station and then a Kriegsmarine one and then a Wehrmacht one. Basically, they're all working together and they're all watching. So how do you go after these things? Right. So this is the plan on the next slide. It's reasonably straightforward. If you can jam it, we're going to jam it. Because if we can jam it, we can also spoof it. So that's where Taxable and Glimmer come in, where they create ghost fleets and ghost airbornes. We're going to look at that later, but if you want to know more, see Tom's show with Woody, because he covers it far better than I can, because it's really technical.
Yeah, it was a good show, that one.
It's brilliant. The next thing is, if it's going to be difficult to repair, we're going to hit it first, because there's no point constantly going back to something that's being put back together. So they've basically created this sort of sliding scale of 42 sites, which they're going to be attacking, increasing in intensity heading into that sort of first week of June. And then in the last 3 days, they're going to go after 9 specific ones. 3 that the Navy say they want knocked out, and 6 that the Air Force are a bit worried about. So those are actually going to be the ones we're going to have a bit of a focus on throughout this presentation. Now, the fun thing is everyone talks about the stripes, and we're not going to get into stripes too much about this. But when the order went out on the 3rd and 4th, they still had a lot of these radar sites to go after. So a lot of 2 Tactical Air Force's aircraft weren't painted until the last minute, which shows why they're all a bit wonky. Because if you suddenly see lots of aircraft with lots of stripes flying over you and attacking you, something's going to be up, because that's kind of noticeable. So these sites are quite small. They are a small target area. So what is a good thing to put a lot of ordnance into a target area? It is a fighter bomber. And the 2 that we're going to focus on are, well, to be fair, we're really going to only focus on one.
Yeah,
it's my show. So.
Okay, well, let's do the lesser one first.
Yes. So we've got the Bombfire, the Spitfire Mark 9 LF. So basically what you've got is a Mark 9 Spitfire with Merlin 66, an E-wing, if we're going to get properly geeky on this one, which has got the 2 20mm Hispano 2 cannons, and also a couple 50 cals, good old Brownings in there as well. Now this Spitfire can carry essentially 3 bombs totaling out at about £1,000. It's still very fast. It's tuned for low levels, so I think the supercharger gives the best output at about 11,000 feet. So this one is actually the most produced version of the Mark IX. This is the one that Cunningham was desperate for in the Mediterranean the year before. So there's a lot of these. They have issues, which we're going to come back to in a minute, because the other main frontline fighter bomber for 2 TAF is, of course, the next slide, which is my beloved.
Yeah.
Yay, there we go. Drink, everybody. So the Hawker Typhoon, the great next step forward that didn't actually get taken. 2,000 horsepower engine with 2,000-pound bombs on it. It's going to weigh about 13,000 pounds. It is a big beast. It's about a third bigger than a Hurricane. I've been fortunate enough to see a Hurricane and the Typhoon that's in the RAF Museum together, and the Typhoon is just huge.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is, it's a Sydney cam design, which means he's made it as strong as he possibly can, which means they've discovered it can carry a lot of ordnance. So from April, Kate Humble's dad, test pilot Bill Humble, has proved that you can drop 1,000-pound bombs off of it. So you suddenly have this aircraft that can carry 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds, or 2,000 pounds worth of bombs. But also, in the preceding months, only from really the beginning of 1944 has the RP-3 rocket really come into its own. So this is essentially a scaffold pole full of cordite with a 5-inch artillery shell screwed onto the end of it. That's basically it. And it can carry, we're going to say, I've said 8 here. Yes, it could be 12 and it could be 16, but we're not going to worry about that too much, because that's basically your standard layout. And for what the mission profiles we're going to be talking about, to have the range and the speed for what it needs to do, they're just going to carry 8.
Super.
So
I'm going to jump in now because
yep.
A, I want to, and B, there's a couple of questions that the Canadians in the sidebar have been asking that I thought we'll get them covered now. One was Alexander Fitzgerald Black is asking about no, hang on, wrong one. There we go. There we go. Going back to Bruneval, basically. Did anything collected there have any bearing directly to do with D-Day? And then David O'Keefe jumped in and said 2 years have passed, so it was helping us understand. But do you want to address that one?
Well, what they get with biting is a point in time, and they suddenly realize that actually the Germans have caught up. The difference, from my understanding, is what they then do with radar is very much defensive.
Right.
So you're immediately looking at a layered defense. So you have the Frey and the Wassermans are going to be scanning, and then the Würzburgs are going to be tracking so that the fighters can then be directed onto it, which for them is vital, because if you think from the time of biting onwards, the exponential increase of raids going across to Germany. So they are immediately looking at how to use radar in a purely defensive role. Now, we won't get into it because, frankly, this thing's long enough as it is. You have the birth of sort of electronic warfare. One of the chaps in the sidebar mentioned the Wild Weasels. You have that with Typhoon Abdullah, which is a radar-equipped Typhoon, which the whole point is it locates a Würzburg and it can drop a marker on it so that a wing can fly. Because the other thing we're going to talk about is it's not just dropping your weapons on these things, it's finding them. Because you're flying across the channel for 20 minutes and you're not going to pop up where you think you pop up, because you're flying basically on speed, height, and your watch. That's essentially navigation. So what the Abdullah Typhoon does is it basically points everybody in the right direction. But very quickly, the radar operators would see these dots getting closer and they just turn the radar off. So, the ability that they would then have later on in Vietnam, where they'd be then able to use inertial navigation and things like that to pinpoint these things, paint them, and then call in the A6s and things to them, that doesn't exist here. So they're trying it, and that's one of the things Tom raised. Why didn't they do it more? Well, again, it's just finding it.
Okay.
which is 1,000-pound bombs. We're just going to quickly.
I'm going to say one more thing to the group there. If you, as those watching, would like me to do a show about German radar, so how it works and what it's supposed to do, to combine with this show, I do know a guy who is a tour guide, normally Christophe Rowe, who may or may not be watching at some point, who works at the Douve de Livrande Radar Museum and is writing a book about German radar. If you'd like me to get him on to talk about German radar, give me a few yeses in the sidebar, and Woody shall get it done. Okay, so we can go and elaborate on that subject from the German point of view in a future show. But we, as you said, we're here to talk about the blowing of them up rather than the setting of them up. So it's a.
When I first did this, I left a few slides in just showing the layers of defenses of radar. And to be fair, we don't have time to go to it. There's just a lot of them, people. Yeah. So let's do it. So this is the famous D-Day memo. So 10:30 on the morning of D-Day, the Wing Commander Ops gets a phone call from the Ministry of Aircraft Production reminding him that the Typhoon has not been cleared for dropping of 1,000-pound bombs. TUTAF's been dropping 1,000-pound bombs off of the wings of Typhoons for 2 months now. So the Wing Commander basically says, I responded by saying we will attempt to stop the Allied Expeditionary Force from dropping them, and we shall also try to recover the 1,000-pound bombs already dropped, and explain to the recipients that they were dropped in error. So no matter where you are, there's still going to be a bureaucrat knocking on the door as well, because literally as soon as Bill Humble proved you could drop 1,000-pound bombs from a Typhoon and land a Typhoon with a 1,000-pound bomb hung up on it, as soon as the bombs were available, they started dropping them. So what were they dropping them on? Let's get onto the blowing of stuff up. So how do we do it? So this is basically showing the main fighter bombers that we have. So we've got Spitfire 9, Typhoon, P-38 Lightning, P-47 Jug, and the Mustang. Now, the Spitfire you can see there is immediately quite low on the list of basically hitting power. The other problem is because it is designed as a point defense fighter, its range isn't great. So the more weight you put on it, it's going to struggle. So as you see there in the range thing, and I have to thank Ian Bott for letting me use these illustrations. It's really kind of him. Give him a follow-up. Yeah, Ian's fantastic. The Typhoon with a full bomb load can go over twice as far as a Spitfire, which is going to become very vital in the weeks coming up to it. The other thing is the Spitfire has some nasty characteristics on the ground. It's a tricky aircraft to take off in land. And immediately when you put 1,000 pounds worth of bombs on it, it gets a lot trickier to do it. And there's a lot of accidents. So if we look at the next one, this is the other problem. It's not so a dive bomber is designed to drop bombs in a dive. So there'll be things like dive brakes, and there'll also be a little thing that basically pushes the bomb on the center line away from the propeller. Now, fighter bombers don't tend to have that. So you've got to do this little flick release, which means as you're coming in the dive, you'll keep the target in your gun sight or on it, but just before you release your weapons, you actually have to pull back on the stick. So you're losing sight of your target and then you release. Because if you don't, the bomb's going to go through the propeller and make a mess of everything except the target. So the main thing that the bomb fire's got is that there's a lot of them. So, this is the thing. You've got volume. It's not great, but it does a job. It's also, not great for taking flak damage from below because that's where all its vitals are. But if we move on, we can start talking about the sort of intricacies of why you...
People are asking the sidebar about 500-pound bombs. They're talking about other aircraft. There, what we'd obviously worked out in advance that we thought 1,000-pounders were the best suited for this particular job with what they had there. Or is it just because that's what we had? How had they come at that being the magics? I mean, I know you said they've worked out that Typhoon can carry them, but what's special about using that against these radar installations?
So the series of bombs we're talking about is the high explosive medium capacity. So that's I think it's about 40% casing or 60% casing, 40% explosives. So they're basically the same series that then goes up to the tall boy and things like that. Now what they find with this is these medium capacity, medium case bombs are very, very effective. They do incredible blast damage. Now, the 250-pound by this point is kind of obsolete. The 500-pound is the one that's going to be dropped the most during this period, because they're still manufacturing the 1,000-pounders with the longer tail that it needs. It kind of comes down to, well, we can drop 500-pounders, but it's better than a 500-pounder is a 1,000-pounder. It's just volume. And the thing is, as we've got here with the gun sight, you're not going to hit the target. So the blast from a 1,000-pounder is going to give you a little bit more wiggle room for missing something. Okay. And that's what we're going to talk about now. And use John's favorite thing, which I got a whole thing for that now, because this is the problem. This is the gun sight that's in a Spitfire 9 and a Typhoon. So this is good old Mark III Type 1. This is an air-to-air gun sight. Now, the adjustment on the bottom is range to target. And it basically goes sort of 100 yards, 200 yards, 500 yards for attacking an aircraft. Now, you don't want to be in a dive at 100 yards up from a target, because you've basically become the bomb itself. So what Roland Beaumont does when he's gone back after the first, we're going to come to that as well. We're going to, he's gone back to Hawkers after basically proving that in a low-level attack role, the Typhoon can do the job. But what he basically wants is a new gun sight, which is what becomes the gyro gun sight that goes in the Tempest and the Spitfire 14. But the interim is you get this little dial there, which gives you a bit of depression on the gun sight. So that's basically going to tilt the glass and force your receptacle down to give you a little bit of drop for when you release your ordnance. And that's it. There is no thought or design going into helping the Mark I eyeball and the Mark I computer to drop this weaponry. So when we will not get into my argument about precision and a certain book that came out recently, John gave me a great hole. Yeah, we're not rabbit hole. That's fun.
That's the entire Watership Down burrow. That is a go down that one, and we're lost for days, aren't we? Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell, we're talking about, by the way, folks. Yeah,
we don't want to do that. So that John Bernstein, who's watching, gave me a great line, which is Kentucky windage, which is even with a precision weapon, you're going to dial in a little bit because it's not going to do what you think it is. So for this, you don't really have the tools you need for something to give you that laser precision. So if we go into the next bit, what we're going to just do is run through formations. So you got finger fours. As you approach your target, the lead's going to call out different types of attacks. So basically we've got echelon port, echelon starboard. As you can see, the maneuvers are a little bit tricky. And this is usually being done under fire. So if we go into the next slide, what you can see is you've got to get into this position where you can roll in quite easily. So you will fly past the target will go under your wing so that when it's gone past the trailing edge, the leader can keep their eye on it. He'll then call break or, leader going down, something like that. And he will then do a stall turn or a half roll in, and everyone will follow him at a second or two's interval, which is going to give you enough time to go in. But by going past the target and being able to look over your shoulder, the leader is going to be able to keep the target in his eyesight all the way around. So if we go to the next slide, because we're coming up against heavily defended targets, what we have quite a bit of is a strike package going in with an escort. Now, the escort's role is literally to strafe the flak weapons, the anti-aircraft defenses. So the great Harry Hardy, who flew the 440 Squadron, talked about the Germans very kindly put everything in threes so that you could only ever shoot up two, and there was always one shooting back at you the whole time. So what you would have here is, if we say blue flight's going into the attack, red flight is going to be doing the strafing. They're going to be maneuvering to make sure they're coming out of the sun as much as they can, so that you're splitting the fire. Now, the anti-flak Typhoons or Spitfires, whatever, are going to go in momentarily earlier, and they're going to try to coordinate so that just as they're leaving the target area, the bombers will be able to be coming in just after it. So you've got split seconds. But at the same time, you're being shot at. At the same time, there's a lot of aircraft in a congested airspace. And as we're going to talk about when we go to our next slide.
And that, when you say strafing, that's machine guns or machine guns and rockets?
No, that's just cannon.
Just cannon. Okay. Yeah, sorry, cannon is the correct term. Yeah, sorry, my mistake. Rookie
Well,
error.
yeah. You're basically going to be you're going to be using your guns. Later on, they tried doing it with rockets and things. But for the most part, we've got a few issues. Now, there's a lot on this slide, and I apologize for it. But this is where we start talking about the problems with rockets. Now, the rocket Typhoon, rocket firing Typhoon, isn't it wonderful? Yes, it is. Yeah, the old adage is it's a terrible airplane, but it's a great tank buster. Actually, no, it's actually a pretty good airplane and a terrible tank buster because of this problem. But
I've seen the paintings.
Oh yeah, we've got one on the wall here. Yeah, it's. That's for another show, I think. Let's do one more time. We can talk about artillery for the whole time. And the issue you've got here is TAC art. Yeah, that would be a good one. First roll of the Mustangs as well and Typhoons. Anyways, so you have your flight of rocket firing Typhoons. You're going to come in at a varying height, around about 8,000 feet, and you're going to roll in and dive anything between 45 to 60 degrees from a high attack. You can also come in very low as well on about 15 degree. But we're just going to talk about this one because the maths for this one's a little bit easier. You roll in. Now, you will be doing roughly 550 miles an hour in a dive at 60 degrees. So that little Typhoon there, I've angled at 60 degrees. So you're standing on your rudder pedals going into your target. You want to release your weapons at about 4,000 feet, which is about 1,700 yards from the target. That gives the rocket enough time to get up to its maximum velocity so that it causes the most amount of damage. Now, the problem is, if you are 150 yards further out, your rocket's going to drop 15 yards short. If you're 150 yards too close, you're going to be 15 yards long. That's big. A blast area for an RP3 rocket is probably about half of that, maybe 10 yards to do effective damage. And if you're diving at 550 miles an hour, 150 yards is nothing.
Yeah.
So you're being shot at, your aircraft's being buffeted around. It's probably making a lot of strange noises because it's a very vibraty aircraft anyways. Airplanes don't like to dive because they're designed to fly. And you've got these moments, this split moment where you've got to get your weapons off. And then as soon as you start adding G-force to it, the more positive G you're pulling, that's going to take another 30 yards off. So there's all of this going on in a 20-year-old's head, amped up on adrenaline, with a lot of people trying to kill him. Mm. So it's insane. The things when you meet the veterans as well, they're not big guys. They're wiry, but
their balls are big though. Excuse me for being indelicate, but dude, I don't suppose you examined those though, did you?
I remember asking Tom Carter what it was like, and he went, "It was exciting, but I prefer to have my excitement in bed." And you're like, "Well, I can completely agree with you there, Tom."
Yeah.
Anyways, let's go on to the next one, because this is where we're going to add in sort of wind. So all of those previous figures are in still air. As soon as we add in wind, things again jump out. So 20 mile an hour of side wind is again 30 yards. And then for every 4 degrees you're dialing in to keep yourself on target, that's about 50 yards off of it. Because we're not talking about even a torpedo that can be dialed into a certain direction. Once you push the button on the rockets, they're going to go as straight as they can. So if you're having to sort of crank your aircraft over a bit to keep it on the target, at that last moment, you're going to have to kick the rudder around and get them off. And as soon as you do that, you speed up, and therefore you're 150 yards increases as well. So if we crack on, we have to say this. The fighter bomber, and especially a rocket Typhoon, is an area weapon system. There you go, John. I've got these two pictures here because they're important. These are not precision weapons being put together very, very carefully by people who are very worried about the precision and how true these things are going to fly. This is a bunch of hard-pressed armorers who, like you can see in the right-hand picture there, have got hundreds of these things to put together every day. So they're not really going to give a monkeys if they've bashed, they've bashed a fin, or they've cross-threaded the screw on the warhead, because they've got another 200 of these things to do before they can have a brew. So this is volume warfare. This is not, or I'm going to say it again, precision. Hello, Malcolm, if you're watching. This is not that. So if we start looking at what is happening, so we've talked about how they're going to do it. So this is Target Appendix 11. This is what the pilots are going to be getting for each mission. So they will get photo reconnaissance information, and they'll also get a target diagram as well. Now, this is actually coming from the Central Intelligence Unit. This is coming from Dr. Jones's team. They have been pulling all of this together. So, this is one of the most highly photographed coastlines in the world. Now, as you can see here, in the air, you can't really see anything. And I was going to put in loads of aerial photos to spot what these things. There's no point. You can't see the damn things because even though they're big, they blend in. So you can see you've got Hauteville here on Cap de la Hague, so Caudecotein Peninsula. You've got the beach, you've got cliffs, and then you've immediately got the fortifications. So on the right, we can see you've got Freya down the bottom, a giant Würzburg. Oh, there we go. So you've got Freya down the front, you've got your giant Würzburg, and then more Freyas behind. Now, what they don't have on here is all the flak elements. So basically, as you're going in here, there's another page that will have where they think the flak is, and that's usually around the back, firing over the top. So let's return to Bruneval, because John Frost goes in all very quiet. 609 Squadron go in a little bit louder. So on the day before the operations begin, Wing Commander Peter Brooker and Johnny Wells go and have a butcher's at Bruneval. So if you go to the next slide, mate, this is the appendix 12 or whatever it is for Bruneval. Now this is actually quite good because we can actually see here what their targets are after. You've got trench, you've got light anti-aircraft off to the side. Now, so when we're saying light here, they mean 20 and 37 millimeter flak. This is not, machine gun caliber stuff. This is still going to ruin your day. Now, the chap there on the side is one of my favorite Typhoon pilots. That is Klaus Adam, better known to most people as Sir Ken Adam, the guy who designed Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
And if we were having a Ken Adam drinking game, he was on my bingo card anyway. Yeah.
So getting it in that case, we'll go in. There we go. So Ken's actually only been with 609 for a short while, and this is one of the first big shows, and he's not had a hell of a lot of luck. So what happens on the 11th is you're going in evening time. It's about 7:30 at night. You got 12 aircraft going off from Thorney Island with rockets. They go into attack from about 7,000 feet. Now, just in front of Ken is Bob Wood. He gets his rockets off, and he's immediately hit by about 37 millimeter flak. And his aircraft literally explodes. No messing around. It just goes bang. Ken has no choice but to fire his weapons and try to get out of it. And as he comes out the other side, as he's pulling up, he's lost 2.5 feet worth of his wing because what's left of Bob and his aircraft have taken it out. Now, he immediately breaks for home. He's not messing around. He's going. But you've also got just behind him, you've got a chap called Pierre Sausman, who's actually flying. He's a Belgian flying for the Canadian Air Force. He'd been studying at Princeton when the war broke out. as he then flies through all of this, he gets hit, and he's trying to get his aircraft home, but he decides that he's not going to make it, so he calls Mayday, bails out, and they can't really see where it's happened. He finally comes out of the smoke that's been blowing off the radar site, and they're seeing him struggle to get into his dinghy. Now, the reason I mention this is 609 West Riding Squadron is essentially Belgian. If you are a Belgian Typhoon pilot, you want to be at 609, because basically everyone who's anyone has been flying for this. So immediately, two of the Belgians shoot off to refuel to get back, and Pierre's gone, and he's one of the senior guys. So first radar op by the crack Typhoon outfit. They've lost 2 pilots and 4 very badly damaged aircraft. And this basically sets the tone for the month of May. So if we go on to the next slide, we're going to jump ahead 10 days here, because you're not just losing noobs. In 2 days, 2 wing commanders get shot down, and luckily for them, they get picked up. So on the 21st, the Czech wing goes off in their Spitfire bombers to take out some transport as part of the transport plan. In a day, they lose 16 aircraft. That's the sort of level of attrition we're talking about here. The next day, the chap on the left is a Norwegian called Erik Hjorborn, and he is great. He basically has a penchant for getting shot down in Typhoons. The first time he's shot down by Spitfires. Second time he's shot down by FW190s. And about 10 days before we're talking about now, he's shot down doing a recce over a radar site. So on the 22nd of May, he's picked up by the same Walrus crew for the second time in a week. The chap on the right is our friend Peter Booker, who had just done the recce with Johnny Wells' 609. He gets shot down on the 23rd, so the next day. He's only in the water for about 50 minutes before the Walrus comes and picks him up. And the reason I've got him here is because we're going to have a look at his logbooks a little bit later for this period. But he's brilliant, and Malcolm Sutherland is very kind to let us use his logbooks and these images here. But Peter's overriding problem with this is he's kind of used to getting shot down. It's happened a few times, but he writes a very stern letter to the manufacturers of his watch because he bought it because they assured him it was waterproof, and he now has proof that it's not. But you've got this period where the air sea rescue guys are having all the trade they didn't want. Because not only have they got crews coming back from bombing raids, you've also got all these fighter boys going over 2-3 times a day, not just after radar sites, but after everything else. During this period as well, we probably talk about how, 2nd Tactical Airforce remodeled most of the chateaus in northern France as well, just in case there was some Germans in it. It's that level of things. If it's moving, they're going to attack it. So if we go on to the next slide, we're going to look at Al Watkins. So here we go. We're going to get very Canadian now. So the same day that Erik Hjorborn gets shot down, 440, who's basically just come over from Canada, originally 111 Squadron. Al here has been served in the Aleutian Islands, so he's been fighting the Japanese. He's now flying bomb foons with 440, and Al's from the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan, and he suddenly finds himself in Europe. So this must have been quite something. But anyways, they're going, where are they going after on this one? They're going after Armash. So they're going just behind what's going to become Gold Beach, which 440 will visit again on the morning of D-Day. So they come in low. They're only about 6,000 feet. So they're going to come in with their 500 pounders, almost skip bomb them and try to get out again. Al gets hit. And again, because they've caused so much, I don't want to say destruction, but they've caused a lot of bangs. There's a lot of smoke. And again, it's blowing out to sea. So Al is in MN489. He's hitting the engine. He bails out, and they see him get into his dinghy, and then Al goes into the smoke. 440 stick around flying flat cover for the walrus that was in the area, but Al never comes out of the smoke. They stay around for as long as they can, but they can't find him. 5.5 days later, well up the channel, another walrus just on patrol spots a pilot in a dinghy. They land, it's Al. He's still alive, massively dehydrated, and convinced that the guys picking him up in the walrus are German. So all he's doing is name, rank, and serial number. They get him back to the hospital, still name, rank, and serial for a day until they get him hydrated. And then he finally realizes he's been being a bit silly for the last few days. Al's quite lucky. They give him a DFC and send him home. But this is another highly experienced pilot that is lost on maybe his 10th or 12th op before they send him home. So if we go on to the next slide, we've got the chap with the duck, and we're going to say Harold Freeman VC.
But it's not our first duck on World War II TV,
Is
by
it
the
not?
way, folks. No.
Oh, who was the first duck?
And now I've said it. I can't remember.
No, you
what
said
show
it. You can't remember.
It was fairly recently. A duck came into a show, but it wasn't. We didn't have a photo of the actual duck. It was a duck for representation, but I now can't remember what show it was.
No photos, didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I can't remember now. But this is not our. It's definitely not our first duck. I'll remember in a minute.
This is where we need someone in the sidebar to tell us what the duck was. So Harold Freeman, he is from Winnipeg, my mum's hometown. He is 198 Squadron, and this is the ORB for it. So Squadron Leader Niblet, Flying Officer Armstrong, and then Flying Officer Freeman from Canada, and Sergeant Valley. Go after the radar station at Joburg, which is right round the side of the Caudecotein Peninsula. Direct hits claimed on target. 2 aircraft fail to return. If you were researching this, that's all there was. What actually happened that day is why I've got the VC in there in brackets, because this is one of the few times in two tactical where there's actually a claim for a VC. So 609, again with Ken Adam and George Martin, who would then pretend to be, he gets shot down on D+1, has to pretend to be deaf for quite a bit of time. They go in, 2 squadrons, they come in low. So Joburg's sort of up on a cliff, and they actually, 609 comes in first, and then round the back on the valley, 198 comes sneaking up as well. So 609 get in, they pop up, and then they provide flat cover, and then the 4 Typhoons from 198 Squadron comes in. So Niblet's 1, and as we showed before, it goes 1, 3, 4, 2. So Armstrong's tucked in at the back. Freeman goes in just as he's about to release his payload. He's hit in the tail by 37mm flak. As he then maneuvers his aircraft, he collects Valley as well. And Valley's aircraft breaks off and goes in. Now, what happens next is why there's a claim for VC. 609 tell their squadron MO that they heard Freeman say, "I'm putting this into the radar," over the radio, because they are all convinced if he just pulled up, he would have had enough speed and height to get out before his tail came off. But he doesn't. He flies straight into the Freya and destroys it. Now, later on, a German POW is captured. It's only about a week later. And in his interrogation, he talks about this crazy Englishman who flew his Typhoon into our radar station and destroyed it. Now, this goes right the way up. So Des Scott has flown with Freeman before. He puts in the claim. It goes up the chain of command. It goes to Doc Jones in the Air Ministry. He goes, "That's incredible. I will support it." Lee Mallory, of all people, says yes. But it gets to Mary Conyngham, and he says no for 2 reasons. A, he doesn't believe it was Freeman that went in because there's no proof. All he's got is some photo recon pictures of 2 burning Typhoons and a destroyed radar. And then his main criteria for denying it is he's not the first, he won't be the last. Now, that annoyed his countryman Desmond Scott, which is why there's a whole passage in Typhoon Pilot where he specifically states this and says that, For the rest of my life, when everyone asked, I would say that was Harold Freeman, Royal Canadian Air Force, VC. As far as he was concerned, it was stone cold. But it didn't get it. He gets mentioned in dispatches, and what's left of him is buried at Bayeux. And
I may have to go and visit his grave now. I think I'll pop up there the next couple of days. Yeah,
it's I'll send you the reference. It's an interesting story, and I kind of understand what Mary's saying here, because he's losing by this point. He's already lost 10, 15 Typhoons. We're going to show the numbers in when we get to the end. He's just seeing a lot of his boys not coming home. And this is just another one. He's got other things on his mind to worry about than VCs. Lee Mallory's a little bit more political. And when I was researching this, I was sure he was going to say no, and it was going to be Conningham that said yes. But I suppose this is the first time I've actually found something that I quite like about Lee Mallory. Don't know what happened to the
and if that was a drinking game, we would take an eternity to get drunk, because Lee Mallory is a little bit grumpy, a little bit he's the post turtle, isn't he? What they call it? That's it. Yeah. How did he get up there?
So the most interesting thing about Lee Mallory is his brother, who died on Everest. That's where it ends. He had the good sense not to stick around and write a memoir. But anyways, so let's move on. We're going to change tack slightly here, because there's a lot going on when it comes to this period in 1944, because the Typhoon, unlike the Spitfire, is essentially modular. You have the back half of it is a semi-monocoque. The tail section bolts on and off, and the forward bit is the same Hawker structure that's been knocking around since 1925. So it's basically tubes that are round, sort of flattened off, and you can build this incredibly strong forward structure on it. That means they essentially become Trigger's broom. So there are Typhoons that were delivered in late 1940 that are still flying on the Cap Arcona strikes in 1945. But what we have here, this is 181 Squadron, this picture's taken from a TACAR Mustang that tooled up along next to them, got them all to wave. But what we have here is April 1944, 181. I want to say, where are we? Slide 30. Yeah, 181. So if we start sort of bottom left here, you've got ELC. She has 3-blade propellers, rockets, but she's got the interim canopy. So the Typhoon famously had this coffin hood metal bit on the back pilot's name's gone straight out of my head. Ended up in the Mediterranean, wing commander, Battle Britain pilot. Anyways, basically said, Sydney Cam, we can't see behind us. That's not going to work. And Cam allegedly said, you'll be going so bloody fast, you won't need to look behind you in my airplane. Cam immediately went away and changed the canopy, because Cam was a sort of say something first, do later sort of chap, because he grew up on the shop floor. That same as Mitchell, they were engineers, they weren't designers, and they weren't used to having bloody pilots speaking back to them about their shiny new airplane that was a year late because they hadn't been able to play with it. So we've got an interim canopy. If we look over at the top, you can just see ELS there, which is that one there. That's got the original redone canopy. So it's got the wooden aerial and a lot of framing around the cockpit with the car doors. Now, if you just scroll down a little bit, ELA has the mod. So the Typhoon is the first operational aircraft to have the full teardrop canopy put on it.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is they take a car door Typhoon, they take it to a maintenance unit, they take the top of it off, they weld up the bottom half of the doors, they change 2 of the structural beams, because basically there's no sort of load-bearing structure from about the seat up in it. So they just basically weld up the doors and then bolt on a whip aerial, which is why you can't see it anymore, and this teardrop canopy. Now, this is what everybody's been working to for years, is these blown perspex that aren't deforming. And you can sort of see on the other Typhoons there, without the wooden aerial, they're sort of got this interim fix. So Hawkers, the maintenance units, the company up at Oxford are going like Billio to make these modifications so that for the invasion, the most up-to-date aircraft are available. And there's only about maybe 5 or 6 car door Typhoons involved in D-Day itself. So from when this picture is taken to 6th of June, all those car door aircraft are either modified, sent back to the squadrons, or shot down. One of the two. Now, it's not just the canopies, the propellers, upgrading of the engines that they're doing. They're doing a very, very important thing. So if we go on to the next slide as well. This, again, sorry for people who don't like Canada, is yet another Canadian.
This most of Canada is watching tonight, so it doesn't really matter. Certainly, most of Canada's World War II historians are watching, so I think we'll get no votes against this.
I figured if I kept it reasonably Canadian, Dave and Mike will stay on my side and they won't call me up on too much stuff. But anyways, this is Stuart Finlayson. He's from Toronto. This is his Typhoon, JR 311. This is early 1944 because it's still got the bomb carriers. Before 175 switched over to rockets. So what is happening on the 24th of May? They're going to the Havre, to Cap to the Hev. If you hit the next slide, we can see what they're going after. So this is the famous 609 gun camera shot from D-Day. So they're still going back to this place on D-Day. So what we've got here is in green, you've got a giant Würzburg tracking radar. In red, you've got a Wasserman. And then in blue, you've got the buildings where the controllers are sitting. So Stuart and 175 are going after this. And as you can see, it's a bit of a hard nut to crack. 609 gone. This picture is taken on the 6th, the afternoon of D-Day itself. They don't actually knock it out until a couple of days later because they've positioned all this stuff in a very difficult way to hit. So 4 anti-flak Typhoons go in first. They do a pretty good job because the records state that when the other 4 aircraft go in, the flak is actually quite light. Usual thing, high attack, they roll in, steep dive, and Finlayson's tail comes off. This is the classic problem with the Typhoon. She had problems at both ends. The engine was initially unreliable, and she would shed her tail feathers. Now, this actually is a bit shocking because they fixed this, haven't they? Yes and no. What has happened is in the rush to get all these aircraft modified, 175's wing have missed something. And what they've missed is the thing that fixes the tail problem, which is claimed about 20 pilots up and including Finlayson, with only 1 or 2 surviving. So what you have is a couple issues. You have an engine that's bolted to the main spar, which creates vibration. You then have compression coming off of a thick wing at high speed, causing the elevators to flutter. And what this does is it creates a stress point in the rear monocoque. Now, you can have a brand new aircraft and metal is fickle. If enough stress is applied, it will break. So you had older Typhoons having their tails come off, and you had brand new aircraft with the tail come off. So Ken Seth Smith, the test pilot, his aircraft had literally 10 hours on it when the tail came off of it. So they have been working like mad to fix this. See, Alex. And what they've done is the first thing they do is they put those fish plates on it, which is this outward thing that they've strengthened it. Tim Elkington once said that the only things the fish plates ever did for him was got him a night out in Oxford when they put him on in his airplane. But what they do, they take one aircraft to Farnborough and they literally put it on a jig and shake it to pieces. And they find that the harmonics of the aircraft are wrong. So they need to do something called Mod 353, which is increase the mass balance weights on the elevators. So basically they sort of sit on a hinge and you've got a big weight on this end and they double the weight there. But they also need to put an inertial weight onto the control column. So that basically is causing those added weights. And we're only talking about 20 pounds either end. So just under 10 kilos in modern money. Mm-hmm. And that actually dampens all the vibration. They also move the weights in the elevators forward to the leading edge. And that solves the problem. But when they get back, 175's boss says, what the hell? The squadron maintenance officer goes back to the records. He then goes to the wing maintenance officer, and they realize they've missed about a squadron's worth of aircraft because they're so busy getting them around to get the new canopies put on, get the rockets put on, get all the other mods put on, the new filters on the engines. All of this, something's given. And it's cost at least one pilot his life because the focus is D-Day. So why is this mad rush? Because this is a one shot deal. And to be fair, in the great scheme of things, Finlayson's replaceable. Yeah. And that's it's the devil's math there, isn't it? It's a very sad story, and it shows just how busy these squadrons were to try to get this going.
Ultimately, it's reinforcing this idea that the build up to D-Day is really important. It's it's an obvious statement to make, but it really is true. And once you've committed to a time frame, which they have committed to this spring, early summer 1944, everything has to fit to that, regardless of whether it's completely ready or not. There's a whole series of things that have to now be implemented. This is one of them, and it's whether we're ready or not. You can't. Everyone's singing to the same tune. That's it. It's got to go. It's you're right. And in the grand scheme of things, the overseers of Overlord stroke Neptune are talking about millions of men, not individual pilots and individual squadrons.
Yep. And there's more coming off the production line by the minute. There's more pilots arriving by the day.
But this Sheldrake just asked, does that finally sort out the problem though?
Yeah. So there's two
if
things.
It gets done. Yeah.
There's two elements. As they're developing the Tempest, they increase the size of the elevator and the horizontal stabilizer. So if you look at pictures, you can actually see the leading edge going over the fish plates. That means it's got what they call the Tempest tail, and that comes in 1943. But this rebalancing solves it. It takes the harmonic resonancy, or it changes the resonancy so that it doesn't cause the tail to come off. And it's literally 2 lead weights that they've slapped on this aircraft. There's a fantastic article in the Aviation Historian about it, which is written by Ken Seth-Smith's son, who did the research into it. It's brilliant. But let's get to the nights before, because we have to remember that there's one bit of the UK that actually takes a bit of a plastering in the lead up to D-Day, and that's Guernsey. So 438 Canadians, they're flying bombfoons. They go after Guernsey twice in 2 days. First day, on the 4th, they get about 75% of the job done. So they knock out one Freya and 2 Vassmans, as we've got there on thing. But there's this one Freya sitting there. And the problem with that one is about 6 hours after these guys go in, 800 C-47s are going to be taking a left turn well within range of this radar. It has to be knocked out. So 438 are sent back to finish the job. Now, in the Google map there, I just wanted to show where we're talking about here. So Fort George is the Citadel now is a housing estate. But basically, what 438 do is they're going to come in sort of around the town and try to escape to sea. So if you sort of think if you're coming left to right on the attack, they're going to try to hit this last radar, bug out towards the Caudecotein, turn left, and race for home. So what happens here is, So on the 3rd they've dropped 16 500-pounders. On the 5th they're coming back again 500-pounders, 8 of them, and they're led by Flight Lieutenant John Saville. He goes in first, lots of flak, because Guernsey's basically a floating flagship by this point. He goes in first, drops his weapons. His number 3, who comes in behind him, bursts out of the flak and sees a massive splash and assumes, as does happen, that the bombs just went flying off and landed in the sea there. So basically over in that little peninsula bit just to the right of where we say Fort George. They form up. They're all good. No Savile. And they realize that he's not there. And they do something quite impressive. They go back, they radio in for a walrus. They say where they think it is, because again, they've just dropped what? There's 8 of them, 16 500-pounders. That's 8,000 pounds worth of bombs. A lot of smoke, a lot of flame, again blowing out to sea. Savile's one of their old boys. They want to pick him up. So they tell the air sea rescue crews that they will fly flat cover for the walrus to get in. And the walrus flies right into that little bit there of St. Peter's Port, looking for Savile, with the Typhoons literally on bingo fuel, trying to keep them safe. Walrus gets in and out. They can't find Savile. If you go to the next slide, because Savile's still in his Typhoon in the bay there. And this is the little memorial that they unveiled on the 70th anniversary. And there's another really nice one on Guernsey as well, with all of the aircraft that were lost around Guernsey as well. But that's John Savile. He was 26. They've located the aircraft. It's in the mud, but there's no intention to raise it. But this is a month of this, and it's only about to get worse, which we're going to come to in a second. But if you hit the next slide. These are Peter Brooker's Wing Commander Peter Brooker, the chap who got the Ruin Watch, who would be killed in April 1945 in a tempest. But what we've got here is, if you zoom into that duty column, Woody. So this is early May. So if we see there where it says Recce radars, that's the first thing we talked about. That's him and Johnny Wells having a look at Bruneval. And then just have a look at that. It goes railway, bridge, radar, railway, radar, railway, radar, tanks, armed recce. And then on the next one, it's exactly the same. So sorry, the next slide.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, again, it's
there we go. Sorry.
Yeah. And then again, it's to do a little bit of practice. Then Seine Valley radar. And then where it's saying gun tests, that's because there's stuff coming out. So where it says B, that's actually the aircraft he was flying on D-Day in that very famous Pathé footage of them going out of Thorney Island with 19198. But you can see that they're going and they're going and they're going. So you can zoom out of that one. And the next one is those last few days and then into D-Day. So, Dieppe radar. Dieppe, he even says Dieppe radar again. Radar Abbeville.
Again, actually says again, yeah.
And then, radar. So actually where you are there, that's post D-Day. And they're still going after the radar sites.
Wow.
That's one pilot. So the day that John Savile dies, a few hours later, it begins. And what Savile and his men have done has meant that 9th TCC are able to complete their job. We're not going to get into the drops. I'm with Adam Berry on this. I think they did a bloody good job that night to manage to get what they've done. But you can see here, we've got multiple operations going on. So the radar, the job's more or less done. But what you then have is 100 group flying Taxable, Grimmo, Mandrel, doing all these different things off the coast of Normandy, spoofing, covering for what's left. But then more importantly, where we have Taxable and Glimmer, is they're creating ghost fleets. They are making what they have intentionally left or not completely knocked out to have that misdirection, making them look further up the coast so that the actual invasion will get that time. And again, watch Tom show on that, because it's utterly fascinating how they did it. 617 Leonard Cheshire's leading it on that night, and they do an incredible job.
I haven't spoken for ages, but going back what you said at the beginning, you quoted that knocking out every radar station from Ostend to I forget what you said the other end now.
Ostend to Cherbourg, yeah.
Cherbourg, but actually they are doing less up the other end because they, as we said on the previous show this week, they're having to leave enough operating radar stations there to know that we can then fool them with the fake formations on the day. So there's this,
you've got patterns inflatable army.
We haven't, it's another potential rabbit hole to go down. But all of this is working within the parameters of having to keep the invasion secret and balancing what we're actually doing to knock out radar here with other raids, in other parts of Europe into Germany. We're just literally looking at Second Tactical Air Force hitting radar. We're not putting into context of all the other things that are going on as well, and Bomber Command and 9th Air Force and up and down the coast, all to just keep a constant array of things going on for the Germans, so that what we're actually doing is hidden along behind a curtain of all sorts of multiple operations. That's basically it, isn't it?
Yeah, and what we're talking about here is we're not saying, right, we're gonna attack radar sites A and C, we're gonna leave B. We're gonna attack all of them, then do a target assessment on them to leave enough so that we can mislead them.
Yeah,
and that's remarkable, because they've 3 sorties a day. We're going to come to the sortie counts in a minute. That this sort of thinking was going on as part of the wider deception plans. You make the joke about Patton's inflatable army and things like that, but this is literally to buy hours. This amount of effort is just to allow that toehold to be made. Yeah, and that's the bit that blows my mind is we're not talking about by flying this we're going to buy 48 hours worth of no, this is literally hit the beach, get inland, dig in.
I think Nick Stanley made the very good point at the beginning of yesterday's show. That those images we have of the landing craft, the shots over the bow of the landing craft approaching beaches, that is the conventional narrative of when D-Day starts, and maybe you include the paratroopers the night before if you're thinking about that aspect, but certainly in what's coming across the channel, that's the we get that fleet approaching the beach is when D-Day starts. And what if we've learned one thing this week is actually that is stage 73 in this whole process.
Yeah, and there's the school of thought that says D-Day begins when Monty gives his planning thing to the king in, was it May 15th?
Yeah, I think so.
This stuff, these guys have already been attacking for a week.
Yeah.
That plan is already in motion. And it's, again, nuance is sexy. It's easy to say, D-Day is 6th of June, but actually it's not. It's, it's husky before. It's all these things. Not Dieppe. I know Dave's left now, but he's
gone now. We can say what we want about Dieppe. He's not gonna. He's gone now. Pinch mate, my arm.
Yeah. Right. So what's the result? So this is in totality, right? So this is 26 days. Just shy of 700 rocket Typhoon sorties are flown. They've fired 4,500 rockets. So if we do the numbers here, that's where are we? 26 sorties a day, roughly.
Yeah.
Across, granted, so that's across maybe 18 squadrons, so that's not too bad. But again, higher numbers for the bombfoons and the bonfires. But again, they're still dropping. I think every sortie that's 2 bombs. You're roughly working that out. But what is the main bit? All 6 long-range reporting stations are out of action. 15 other sites never come back into operation. Now, this is the bit where it gets tricky, because total coverage was about 18%. In that vital area, it was about 4 to 5% at that on that night. So going after Guernsey, going after those sites just behind Aramash, up on Cap de Herve, by Reux, all of that is important because, as we know, they don't see them coming. There's the rumor of that one guy who rang up and said, "Oh, I've got a fleet on my radar," and they went, "No, but that just sounds much like the guy
because amazingly, people still forget the fact that the Troop Carrier Command, bringing the 82nd, 101st, came in from the Channel Islands. They kind of think they came straight down over England, and in fact, that's how even Band of Brothers, which we all love, when you see the shot of Winters looking at the aircraft, he sees the fleet going below him, going the same direction. Well, of course, actually, the 101st went almost 180 to where the fleet was going because they had to go all the way around to come around the other side. And as you said, you made the very good point. Had there been an operating radar on Guernsey and it had picked up those aircraft at maybe 11 p.m., that is potentially 8 or 9 hours warning to get things ready for the defenses on the coast. It's yeah,
and that goes back to that slide we had at the beginning. They would have picked them up forming up.
Yeah,
because it's 100, 150 mile range on those Freyas. That would have, as they crossed the south coast, they would have seen them coming. Anyways, let's go to the butcher's bill, which is on the next page. So this one is total losses. This isn't just radar sites, right? So they're not just going after. So they go off. They'll do an armed recce in the morning, and then in the afternoon they're going to go after some radar. So what is this loss rate? So that's 41 aircraft.
Of how many? Just remind us how many in total.
Okay, so you've got 20 squadrons of Typhoons, about 12 aircraft each. So that's what 240. So you're going to be losing, what's that? 20%.
Yeah, 1 in 5-ish. Yeah. In a month.
Of that, in a month before the biggest invasion in the history of the world.
Yeah. And I say it's not like things calm any after that. It just cranks up another ratchet of tension and drama.
Exactly. So the aircraft are aircraft. The problem's pilots. So you lose 25 pilots, 22 killed, 3 POW. Of that, 8 senior guys are shot down, 2 are killed. 2 squadron leaders are killed. And these are old Typhoon hands as well. You look at the Spitfire losses, 51 aircraft. Okay, out of a bigger group. But as we were showing, less capable for what it was needed to be doing. So again, you're looking at volume. But again, 51 aircraft, but many less pilots because they've been able to get picked up. They only lose 10, but 7 POs. Again, 17 out of 51. That's not bad. That's
and again, a reminder of what a great job we just said it. The air sea rescue guys are doing.
Yeah, exactly.
50% or more recovered. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. So totals 92 aircraft, 42 pilots, and that's not even considering mosquitoes, the TACAR Mustangs. There was one TACAR Mustang who was photographing 609 going in. The guy flew home with shrapnel in his stomach. The TACAR guys are incredible, or the Mitchells, or the mosquito bombers, the A26, all of that as well.
Or the essentially diversionary raids happening into Germany and Norway that are just designed, we just said, to kind of paint this bigger picture of what's going on. Some of them are being shot down as well, in ultimately something that isn't really of direct importance. It is, but it's
doing
part of
the thing
history,
over
isn't
here.
it?
It's remarkable from such a small thing. So if you just go to the next one, I've just done 2 comparison graphs. So this is losses. The blue is aircraft, the red is pilots killed. So around that critical period when Eric Hebjorn and Peter Brooker get shot down and get picked up, you're losing quite a bit. Now, as you said a minute ago, it's about to get a lot worse. So if you look at this graph, it tops out at 8. So the worst day, they lose 7 aircraft, right? Spitfires, they lose 16. When we go to the next month, this is the Normandy campaign.
Yeah, so over 16, okay. And then another one there, that's what, 17, 18?
Yeah, so interestingly, 6th of June, after the Canadian wing goes in, not a lot is requested of the Typhoon wings, so they're released on armed recce's. The next day, so that spike is 7th of June. That's where things get bad because they're having to fly in through the naval screen, through these very narrow channels to hit the close air support calls that they're getting and then go further in and behind. But you look there, you sort of see the spike there in the middle. That's Mortain. That's June. That's July. That's but a bit further on, you've got the big spikes there. A bit further on, so that big spike there is Mortain. Then the next one's Falaise.
Yeah.
And then when you've got the breakouts, they're trying to keep up, so they're then actually at the edge of that 250 mile range.
Wow.
So it's that's a whole other story, but it just shows this is a really bad period. It gets a lot worse.
Martin Harley just made the good question about presumably these pilots that lost their lives, they knew that the invasion was imminent. You know, they know they're doing that. They've not been breathed. They're not bigoted in the sense they haven't been given the full plan, but they do know this is to do with an invasion. They're not.
Oh yeah. They know, they all know something's coming. And when they're going after these radar sites, they know something big's coming soon, but they don't know what. So what they actually, so end of May, beginning of June, you know, what I don't have showing you where all the bases are. So they're all sort of around Portsmouth, Southampton, Devon. That's where they're all the forward temporary airfields are. So they're flying over and they're used to seeing a lot of ships. So when 438 coming back from Guernsey, 609 are coming back from going after a chateau just behind Gold Beach that they think Rommel's in. And Peter Brooker's flying that, and they see the ship sailing out. And Brooker breaks radio silence and says, "Shut up, all of you. I'll talk to you on the ground." So they taxi into dispersal. They jump out. Immediately, the Irks attack the planes with black and white paint. And Brooker says, "You're confined to base. Invasion's tomorrow. Get a cup of tea. We're having a briefing." And it begins.
Wow. Nice way to end the talk in many ways, that little quote there. Yeah, well, I mean, I knew it was going to be a good way to end the week. I mean, they've all been good this week. There's been no weak link this week. They've all been good. Internet quality varied a bit, but the information did not vary at all. It was all been amazing. So, yeah, no, it's just that reminder again that however much I know, I still can afford to learn a lot more and spread out and pay more attention to this stuff. And, you know, I can see the Normandy guides who are watching this and thinking my intro at the beginning of the day needs to be longer, because, you know, that's always a debate. And whether if you're doing a book on the invasion, you know, if you're writing about whatever, the South Staffs or the Green Howards or the 4th Infantry, how much stuff do you put in that preamble about what has happened in advance? Do you talk about SOE? Do you talk about OSS? Do you talk about raid? You know, it's important to understand, but you're just dragging your book out, you know. So it's the same on a guided tour. You know, do you do all that, stand there for an hour saying this has had to happen, 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 this has had to happen? You know, you've lost an hour. It's amazing. It's amazing how much more we should know about this stuff. It's been a really good pleasure talking to you, Matt. I love it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, mate. It's been good fun.
No, it's been great stuff, and definitely there was enough questions there about Trent, who I've been talking with to Trent about various aspects of radar as Australian stuff on Twitter, and I'm either going to schedule an entire week about radar at one point, or at least like a radar weekend or something. There are enough topics within that subject, I think, to generate at least 3 or 4 shows, if not a whole week. And I think I'll definitely get Christoph, my mate on in Normandy, to talk about the German radar and what's been going on with that and how the museum works. And yeah, it's selling it to a wide audience, because I don't, you know, a radar week doesn't perhaps sound as exciting as Airborne Week or Burma Week, but Technology Week. Anyway, the thing is, what's interesting is actually the viewing numbers are about the steady, whether I'm talking about airborne troops or Rangers or stuff like this. Give it 2 weeks, pretty much all the shows hit the same kind of viewership anyway. So it's about, people seem to be interested in good history regardless of what the actual subject is.
This one's got Typhoons. It's going to do really well.
It's got Typhoons in it, so that's it. Yeah. So well, there we are. We've got to an hour and a half. I will remind people we've got coming up, and then I'll speak to you and say goodbye in a second. So I've actually got the weekend off. I say off. I'm going out doing some more filming for shows coming up in June, because the live streams, the Battlefield live streams, start soon, folks. So stay tuned for that. And then Monday we start Leadership Week. So Peter Caddick Adams is on. Dr. Philip Blood is on. Kevin Hemel is on, coming to talk about pattern. We've got Colonel John Antal coming on to talk about Eisenhower. So that'll be really looking at their personalities, looking at their leadership styles, that kind of thing. And then, of course, on June the 6th, we kick off with all our coverage about what's going on Operation Overlord. I am, by the way, guesting on the We Happy Few Band of Brothers podcast on the night of June the 5th. I'm doing some stuff on Pegasus Bridge. So if you're interested in the Band of Brothers, check the We Happy Few Twitter account or Facebook account, run by Matthew Leach, who was played by Talbot, who played Talbot, because he's doing some exciting stuff. So check me out on that. And yeah, great. So, but it remains for me now to say thank you to Matt Bone for coming on. I don't think you actually said the word Typhoon more than about half a dozen times. I think actually, if people are playing a drinking game, they're not actually going to be completely drunk, depending on what size shots they're taking.
If John's still watching, I actually had to post it to make sure I said aerial weapon system. So there we go.
And clearly from the discussions there, we could, there's lots more we can talk about. And as Trent says there, how radar was used and how radar technology developed over the war is a subject in its own right. But as you said at the beginning of the show, we're going to talk about how we blew this stuff up, not so much how it worked. It's all part of it. Anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Bone. Check if you don't follow Matt on Twitter, you should be, and you can find him doing his hedge hopping shows with the Great History Hack podcast there. So if you want more of Matt's aviation knowledge, that's the place to go. And he does stuff there with Mike Bechtold, who's also watching tonight. They're doing some great stuff. So lots of aviation stuff out there if you want it. But that's it. I'm going to end the show. I will see you all next week for Leadership Week. Cheers, Matt. Cheers, everybody, for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all again. Don't forget, check out Patreon. Check out the links below and go and buy some books about typhoons. You know you want to. Cheers, everybody. Good night.
Good night.